For the last few years, we've been seeing rising expectations for impeccable and reliable connectivity, as well as a dynamic shift towards increased digitalization of society and industries of all kinds. To explore the challenges in the telco sector, as well as the role of women in this highly male-dominated field, I'm delighted to now be joined by Alex Tempest, Managing Director at BT Wholesale. Thanks for joining us, Alex. So let's start with your current role. You've been BT Wholesale's Managing Director for nearly 6 years now, and your vast experience also includes other leadership roles in the telco sector. Can you share more about the lessons learned and the changes you've seen in the industry?
Of course, and thank you for having me, Annie. As you mentioned, I've been BT Wholesale's Managing Director for the last 6 years, and even in those 6 years, I've seen an enormous change within the telecoms industry. A lot of this is driven around transformation and agility, and underpinned is, to your point, that whole requirement for impeccable networks, which of course take a huge amount of investment. And those networks are traditionally your fixed networks and your mobile networks. And obviously, working within BT Wholesale, I actually sell products that are based on both networks. So if we look at transformation first, companies are just transforming the world over. So what are they looking for? They're looking for largely managed services. They want to know that they have the ability to take all of the products that companies like BT sell and pull them together in a managed service environment. Now, within wholesale, we sell in an indirect way. So that means we sell through other companies. And I've actually seen these companies really develop all of their broad capabilities to meet this new challenge. So whether it's going through cloud opportunities or it's simply looking at actually how we can utilize existing and new environments like network edge for low latency, they're actually pulling together the various component parts and creating things that are very bespoke for organizations. And of course, as we have moved into a new era, it's been really heightened and facilitated by going through COVID. And actually, most companies looking at what it means when they transform quickly and actually what that brings to their customer base. So I think transformation as a theme is driving a lot of this network change.
That's a very good point. And can you tell us more about your current role and its challenges? And what are your goals for BT Wholesale in this year?
Of course. So my current role within BT Wholesale is I manage 3 specific segments of the market. So I have a team that manages the mobile network operators. I have a team that manages the mobile virtual network operators, and then a team that looks after the wholesale partners. And typically, these 3 segments don't really cross over in any kind of way. So they have their own distinct challenges, but also their distinct opportunities. And we're seeing a real move away quite naturally from all of our legacy connectivity. And it really is looking at where we can move into new areas to actually drive and develop new revenue streams. And so we're seeing a lot of companies that are going into cloud infrastructure and working through what that can mean to their end customers. Typically, I mentioned before the low latency opportunity. This also gives us an opportunity to do the things that we really live by in BT, and one of those is connect for good. And so with the low latency opportunity at this moment in time, we're looking at how we can utilize that to protect our public sector workers. An example of this would be the local police forces that we all have, and actually how we can connect to their body cams to keep them safe. And this uses low latency architecture. And that simply means that all of our equipment sits towards the edge of the network to cut down on that latency opportunity. There are many, many other areas where things like this are getting used. We can see it also in healthcare, and so quite frequently you will see patients wanting to get consultants to actually give them diagnoses, whether it is at a distance, because potentially what they're looking for, maybe there's a specialist, but that specialist isn't in their local area or necessarily in their country. And so what happens is we can do things like haptic technology, which allows people to look at a distance at patient records, but also be able to consult with a patient using haptic technology, and equally, and might be challenging for some, but also operate at a distance as well. So all of these things are really opening up the opportunity of how we can become a more agile population on a global footprint.
And these are some very interesting examples you're giving there. So you mentioned cloud infrastructure, but what else are customers demanding from you now that's different to, say, 2 or 3 years ago? And how can BT Wholesale improve its revenues and margins? How can the business grow, essentially?
If you look at technology and then you actually look at what I talked about in terms of how you bundle everything, customers want to be able to engage with an organization like BT Wholesale, and they want to engage on a partnership level. They want to help develop what we are doing next. And that sounds very simplistic, but it is amazing actually how many organizations, when you're a large organization, are treated as a supplier. And so what we do is we work very closely with all of our customers in terms of their technology requirements, where they're developing. We look at, we're driving out developments on things like drones. So currently we are testing a drone corridor, which allows us to take a strip of airspace and work through actually how we can utilize drones in a very safe way, and what the opportunity is that this will really open up. We also look at urban areas, so things like small cells. And when you're in a city, actually, how can you connect, and how can you do that easily? And small cells give organizations like the mobile network operators a real opportunity to be able to provide connectivity in a brilliant way in very dense areas. Obviously, the opposite to that is in rural communities, and we're developing our shared rural networks, to make sure that there is nobody who is disengaged by a lack of connectivity.
And as we know, the telecoms industry is heavily male-dominated. How would you describe your experience in this environment so far?
I wholeheartedly agree. It is very male dominated. And I guess my experience to some degree is a good one, but I'm not entirely sure whether that's just simply down to my persistence. Okay. And I have a lot of persistence, but I also have an incredible amount of allies. And when I say allies, that is from a male perspective as well as a female perspective. And I have undoubtedly struggled at certain points in my career. I have undoubtedly not been taken perhaps as seriously as some of my male colleagues have been, or I've had to fight for a space at the table. But, ultimately, I am the managing director of BT Wholesale, so I would suggest that my persistence has probably paid off.
That's great to hear. And what piece of advice would you give to young women who are considering a career in the telecoms sector?
Oh, I think, well, persistence is absolutely the very first thing, as I've mentioned. I think the second is skills, right? So develop your understanding of, the required technical skills for the area that you want to go into. So whether it is networking, cybersecurity, software development, having that solid skill set is it's really important. Okay. And I think it's important for two pieces. It's important. The first piece is it gives you the confidence that you need to be able to sit around the table and know that you absolutely have a well-deserved place at that table. Okay. It also allows other people to understand, the depth of knowledge that you have, and also where your opportunity is for the future. And I think it's also about owning the room a little. So don't really let anybody tell you tech isn't for you. I think we're making great strides, whether it is in the tech space or the sports space, to make sure that we have absolute diversity and everybody is seen as an equal. And so recognize, to my point, you have a place at that table. Be confident, be assertive, and be proactive. Make sure that you participate in the discussions, share your ideas, and contribute to projects. I think that is, really important. There are probably three other things I would say as well. Learn continuously. So we've talked a little bit about how technology is evolving very rapidly. And I think if you stay curious and you keep learning, that helps you tremendously. I love Personally, I love to read, so I read industry blogs, I attend conferences, I follow thought leaders, I have regular podcasts that I listen to, and I talk to people about the things that I've learned. And I also remain curious, and I ask questions. I think, the last two are kind of, the first one's around networking. Connect with professionals in the telecom sector. Find mentors and coaches, because they are people who will help you. And it certainly helped me through my entire career. When you connect with people and you can show your value, then they will help, and this is all around allyship as well. So seek that mentorship, find the experienced mentors who can guide you, and ask for them to help you. I do a lot of mentoring and coaching, and frequently it is, I'd say 99% of the time, it is people reaching out to me to ask if I will do this, as opposed to the other way around. And I think that shows that people are prepared to listen, learn, and continue their development.
And in your view, what can be done on an industry-wide level to help women reach their full potential in telco? And what is the role of mentoring programs on this journey?
Okay, well, I think mentoring programs, have already explained what I do, but I think they're incredibly important. Okay, from an industry-wide perspective, I think we've got to commit, and this is something that BT is hugely passionate about. We've got to commit to increasing the senior representation of women in technology-based roles, in the telecom sectors, and we've committed to doing it over the next 3 years. And we've also committed to increasing the representation of women in our sector overall. And so I think that is incredibly important. And I would love to be able to see more organizations doing that. I think investing in attracting and retaining women in our organizations, it's about creating an inclusive environment for them to excel. Okay. And that sounds a very simple thing to do, but it's actually, it takes a huge amount of work, and it takes for everybody to be able to join in. But in order to do this, you actually have to get people on, the journey to understand why it is really important. And the reason that's hard is because we can share our thoughts, and we can tell people what we think we need to do. But unless people participate throughout their own free will, that is going to be very, very difficult. So I think really engaging first of all of the leaders in each of their organizations is really important, to understand what it means to be a truly inclusive organization, and to be that I before you can get the D and the E in terms of diversity and ethnicity. You have to have an inclusive environment, and you have to understand what is challenging people, and actually what you can do to help unblock that. And then I think, once you've done all of that, we need to come together as an industry to annually share our best practices and to showcase, because this is really not about, does BT do this better than anybody else? This is about an industry absolutely doing its very, very best and learning off one another. And in certain circumstances, we share ideas, we pinch ideas, we copy ideas. That is fine. But we must come together and showcase to the outside world, that talented women do exist in technology, especially in the telecom sector, and we want to get more of them.
Alex, thank you for sharing your insights on the current telecoms landscape with us and the role of women in telco. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you, Yanni. I really appreciate you having me on.